Welcome back, everybody, to another deep dive. Credits Gustavo Gomez as both the producer
Oh, wow.
and hey, everyone, and welcome to another deep dive. Today, we're going to be taking a look at tomorrow's weather across the U.S. We've got a bunch of different forecasts in front of us for January 28th, 2025. And, well, let's just say you might want to buckle up. Looks like we've got some wild weather brewing from coast to coast.
Yeah, you could say that again. It's really fascinating to see how different the forecasts are for tomorrow, depending on where you are in the country.
So let's start with the East Coast. What are folks in the Northeast and Midwest going to be waking up to tomorrow?
In the Northeast and Midwest, they better be bundling up. There's this really powerful cold front coming down from Canada,
Yeah.
and it looks like it's going to bring winter's fury to the region. We're talking
Yeah.
freezing temperatures, heavy snowfall, possibly even blizzard conditions in some places, and strong winds.
Wow. So this isn't just, a regular snow day. This sounds pretty serious.
Oh, absolutely. This is the kind of weather that could cause some real disruptions, travel disruptions,
Yeah.
power outages, the whole nine yards.
Yikes. Okay, so anyone planning to travel in the Northeast or Midwest tomorrow might want to check their flights or, you know, reconsider their plans altogether. What about the Southeast? They're usually a bit milder, right?
Yeah, usually. But this is where things get really interesting. The Southeast is actually experiencing a crazy warm spell right now, almost like early spring. The temperatures are way higher than average for this time of year. There's this stubborn high-pressure system just sitting over the region, and it's driving those temperatures up.
So we could have people wearing shorts in the Southeast while people in the Northeast are bundled up in parkas. That's wild. But is that warm weather something we should be worried about? I mean, it sounds nice, but
Well, yeah, it is a little concerning. You see, when we get these early warm spells, it can actually trick plants into budding too early. Imagine like fruit trees bursting into bloom only to get hit by a late frost a couple of weeks later. It could be devastating for crops and really impact local economies.
that's a really good point. It's like, it makes you think about how even pleasant weather can have these hidden consequences. Nature is pretty amazing. So we've got a frozen east and a surprisingly warm southeast. What's going on out west?
All right, so the West Coast is a tale of two extremes. Up north in the Pacific Northwest, they're bracing for some pretty intense weather. Torrential downpours, gale force winds, the whole shebang. There's a massive storm system moving in from the Pacific, and it could bring flooding and coastal erosion.
I can practically hear the wind howling already.
Yeah.
And what about California? They're getting their usual sunshine.
Not quite. While the Pacific Northwest is getting drenched, California is actually facing the opposite problem. They're dealing with really dry conditions, and those strong winds are sticking around. It's a recipe for disaster when it comes to wildfires.
So let me get this straight. We've got potential blizzards in the east, early blooms, and maybe even crop damage in the southeast, and a wild mix of storms and fire risk in the west. That's a lot to handle in just one day. Any parting words of wisdom for our listeners as they face this crazy weather tomorrow?
I think the big takeaway here is that no matter where you are, it's so important to be weather aware. Check those local forecasts before you head out. Be prepared for potential disruptions, and remember, even nice weather can have some hidden impact.
All right, let's jump into this deep dive. Preemptive pardons. Everyone's been talking about them, and we've got a whole pile of articles here ready to break it down.
Yeah, it's pretty wild stuff, really.
We're talking outgoing President Biden pardoning folks like General Milley and Dr. Fauci, and then, bam, incoming President Trump pardons Jan 6 rioters.
And even Biden's own family members, right? Preemptively, too. I mean, that's not something you see every day in presidential history.
Definitely not. So today, let's try to figure this out. What was behind all these pardons? What do they tell us about how each president views the justice system? And what does it mean for, well, all of us? Ready to dive in?
Absolutely. Let's do it.
Okay, so let's start with Biden's pardons.
Yeah.
You mentioned family, and that's where things get really interesting. These pardons, they came right as the House Oversight Committee. The folks in Congress who investigate wrongdoing were looking into Biden's family for influence peddling.
Right.
Influence peddling. That sounds kind of shady, doesn't it?
It can be, yeah. It basically means using your position of power, your connections for personal gain. So in this case, the House Oversight Committee, they were looking into whether Biden's family used those connections to, make money or get special treatment, stuff like that.
So Biden pardoning his family while they're being investigated, that's definitely going to raise some eyebrows.
For sure. And if you dig deeper, Biden was trying to protect them specifically from investigations into their foreign business dealings. There were these allegations that some of his family members were using their connection to him for business opportunities, places like Ukraine and China.
Ah, I see. So Biden was worried that the new Trump administration would, like, use these allegations against his family.
That seems to be the case, yeah. Biden even said publicly that he was afraid of unrelenting attacks and threats from the incoming administration. So he's kind of suggesting he doesn't think his family would get a fair shake under Trump.
So he pardoned them preemptively, basically as protection.
You could say that, yeah. But pardoning family members before any charges are even filed, that's a very unusual move. It makes you wonder if he was trying to obstruct justice or shield them from, legitimate scrutiny.
It's definitely a tricky situation.
Mm-hmm.
But his family wasn't the only one on that pardon list, right? We also had General Milley, Dr. Fauci people, who were pretty heavily criticized by the incoming Trump administration.
Exactly, and it's important to understand why. General Milley, for example, was facing accusations from Trump supporters of, overstepping his authority as chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Some even wanted him court-martialed.
And Dr. Fauci.
Well, he became a target during the pandemic. Trump and his allies accused him of mishandling the COVID-19 response, and there were all these calls for investigations into his actions.
So Biden was essentially trying to prevent any legal trouble for them as well.
It seems that way. It looks like he was worried the incoming administration would use the justice system to go after their political opponents.
So on the one hand, it looks like he's trying to protect people he thinks are innocent from politically motivated attacks. But on the other, it kind of sets a precedent of presidents using pardons to field allies from any kind of accountability, even if they did something wrong.
It's a tough one. No easy answers. It really gets to the heart of the pardon power and how it should be used. Is it a check against injustice, or can it be used to protect friends and family from legitimate scrutiny?
Yeah. And then there's the case of Leonard Peltier.
Oh, right.
He wasn't pardoned, but Biden commuted his sentence, didn't he?
That's correct. Peltier is a Native American activist who was convicted of killing 2 FBI agents back in 1975. It's a case that's been controversial for decades. Many people believe he was wrongly convicted.
But the FBI, they didn't want his sentence commuted, right?
Absolutely not. They maintain he's guilty and should serve out his life sentence.
So Biden basically went against the FBI's recommendation.
He did. And that decision, well, it's been praised by Peltier's supporters, but criticized by those who believe he's guilty.
So we've got Biden pardoning family and people he sees as unfairly targeted by Trump and his supporters, and then commuting the sentence of someone like Leonard Peltier. It's a pretty bold use of the pardon power. But how does it compare to what Trump did?
Now that's where things get even more interesting, because Trump's pardons, well, they were unprecedented in their own way.
And that's what we'll get into next.
Yeah, Trump's pardons, they really stirred things up because he granted clemency to a whole bunch of people involved in the January 6th riots.
Okay, wait, hold on. Biden pardoning his family, that's one thing, but pardoning people who, stormed the Capitol building, that's a whole other level. I mean, didn't some of those folks commit some pretty serious crimes?
Yeah, you're right. We're not just talking about, peaceful protesters here. Some of these people were charged with assaulting police officers, vandalizing the Capitol, even obstructing an official proceeding of Congress.
Yes, so we're not talking about, parking tickets or something.
Yeah.
These were felonies.
Yes, many of them were facing serious felony charges, and the Justice Department had spent months, building cases against them. It was actually the largest investigation in the history of the Justice Department.
Wow, that's huge. So what was Trump's reasoning for pardoning them?
Well, he claimed that these people were, quote, patriots who had been unfairly targeted by a politically motivated justice system. He kept calling them hostages and insisted that the prosecutions were just an attempt to silence his supporters.
But there's tons of video evidence, right?
Yeah.
Showing these people, violently attacking police officers and breaking into the Capitol. How can he say they were unfairly targeted?
That's what a lot of people are asking. Trump's pardons seem to just disregard the evidence and the rule of law, really. And it's completely opposite to what his own attorney general said, condemning the violence that happened on January 6th.
So is he saying that the courts just got it wrong? That these people were actually innocent?
He hasn't explicitly said that, but he's constantly undermined the legitimacy of the investigations and the trials. He's even suggested that some of the rioters were actually, get this, undercover FBI agents or Antifa activists trying to make him look bad.
That sounds like those conspiracy theories that were going around online after the riot.
Exactly. And by pardoning these people, he's basically giving those conspiracy theories more weight, you know, further fueling distrust in our institutions. It's like he's saying that if you're on the right side politically, you can get away with anything.
And this isn't the first time he's used pardons in a controversial way.
Right.
Didn't he pardon some of his close allies, like earlier in his presidency?
He did, yeah. People like Roger Stone and Michael Flynn who were convicted of lying to Congress and the FBI.
It's like there's a pattern here. Both Biden and Trump are using pardons in ways that, benefit them politically or ideologically. Biden's pardons seem to be about protecting people he thinks are innocent, but Trump's are more about rewarding loyalty and pushing a specific narrative, no matter what the facts are.
That's a really sharp observation. And it raises some serious questions about the whole point of the pardon power. Is it meant to fix injustices, or is it there to serve the president's personal interests?
Right. It's almost like they both distrust the legal system, but for totally different reasons.
Yeah.
Biden's afraid of it being used as a political weapon, and Trump seems perfectly happy to use it as one himself.
That's a key difference. Both presidents are reflecting and maybe even contributing to this growing feeling that the justice system isn't impartial anymore.
And we can't forget about that poll we saw, right? The one that said half of Americans don't trust the Justice Department or the FBI under Trump presidency.
Yeah, that poll shows that this issue goes way beyond just these two presidents. It reflects a deep divide in our society, this lack of faith in the very institutions that are supposed to hold us together.
So we've got Biden issuing preemptive pardons to protect his family and people he sees as allies. And then we've got Trump pardoning people who were involved in a violent attack on our democracy. It's a lot to wrap your head around. What does it all mean for us, the regular folks trying to make sense of this whole pardon mess?
Well, that's the big question, isn't it? And that's what we'll dig into as we wrap up our deep dive.
It's crazy, right?
Mhm.
Two presidents using pardons in, completely opposite ways. Biden trying to protect people
Yeah.
he sees as vulnerable, and Trump almost, I don't know, making a point by pardoning the January 6th folks.
And as we were saying before, they both seem to have this distrust in the legal system, but for totally different reasons. It's like they're both looking ahead at potential problems, but coming up with completely different solutions.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
And it's not just them either, right? That poll we talked about shows a lot of Americans feel the same way. It's like this whole pardon thing is just the tip of the iceberg, part of a much bigger problem.
Exactly. These pardons, whether you agree with them or not, they really highlight the cracks in our justice system, They make people question if justice is really blind or if it's all about power, politics, and who you know.
And that's scary, right? Because if people lose faith in the justice system, what happens to the rule of law? Does it mean the system is rigged? That there's no real accountability?
Those are the questions we need to be asking. When presidents use pardons in these unconventional ways, it just reinforces the idea that the justice system is a game that can be manipulated by the powerful. And that's a dangerous message, especially in a democracy where the rule of law is supposed to be everything.
Yeah, it's like these pardons are slowly chipping away at our democracy, eroding the foundation of fairness and equality.
It's a valid concern. The pardon power is meant to be a way to fix injustices, to correct wrongs and show mercy. But when it's used for political gain or to shield allies, it undermines the whole purpose of the justice system.
So what can we do about it? I mean, we can't exactly issue pardons ourselves.
True, but we can stay informed, engage in these kinds of discussions and hold our leaders accountable. We can demand a justice system that's truly blind to politics and serves everyone, not just a select few.
So stay engaged, keep asking questions, and demand better from our leaders. But is that enough? I mean, these pardons have already happened. What's stopping the next president from doing the same thing?
That's the tough part, isn't it? There's no easy answer, no quick fix. But we can't just sit back and do nothing. We need to push for reforms that strengthen the checks and balances on presidential power, make sure the justice system is truly independent, and holds our leaders accountable for their actions, no matter who they are.
It all feels so overwhelming, honestly. But I guess recognizing the problem and talking about it is a good first step.
Absolutely. Awareness is key.
Right.
And then we need to turn that awareness into action. Write to your representatives, support organizations fighting for justice reform, have those difficult conversations with friends and family. Every little bit counts.
So we started this deep dive talking about Biden's pardons and Trump's pardons, but it's really about something much bigger, isn't it? It's about the health of our democracy and whether we can trust the institutions that are supposed to protect us.
You said it. And in the end, the question we're left with is this. What kind of future do we want for our democracy? Do we want a system where justice is truly blind, or one where it's for sale to the highest bidder? That's something each of us needs to answer.
Wow. This deep dive has really given me a lot to think about. I hope you feel the same way. And to you, our listener, we encourage you to keep digging. Read those articles, talk to people, form your own conclusions, because the future of our democracy depends on an engaged and informed citizenry.
Well said. Until next time, keep asking those tough questions and stay curious.